Hey, what is up everyone, and welcome back to another video. In today's video I've got a little special project for you. I just want to say thank you for all the support you guys have given me thus far. I'm basically almost at 1,000 subscribers in like less than 6, I think it's 5 or 6 months, I'm not even sure. But thank you for that. And in today's project we will be building a full stack pagination build. So I'm going to show you how to do some advanced pagination. So we'll be implementing the data, the backend, and then the logic in the front end for the pagination. So you'll be able to list a certain amount of products on your page, and then if you click to a different page, it loads that page and it takes you back to the top. And we have this nice implementation for dynamic pagination, so that you don't say you have 100 pages, don't show all 100 pagination tabs over here, which is not really UI friendly. So basically, if I go to the next page, it's page 3 now. We have a little loader. I didn't put like an icon loader, but you can do that as well. And then when we get to after page 5, so we have 10 pages in total here. If we get to page 5, we can see it skips the first 4, and then it shows you 5, 6, 7, 8 till 10. So you will see when we build the application, this is dynamic, so it would always show you the next 5 pages and then these 3 ellipses, so that it shows you can go back. So if I were to click on 5, it takes me back to the next part. So this is really nice because this is dynamic. So if you have less than 5 pages, it would just show 5 of them. And yeah, I really hope you guys enjoy this video. And if you do, please remember to like and subscribe. And then let's get into it. Okay, so here I'm in my terminal. It's just in my root directory. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start building out the project file structure, and then we can get started. So first things first, I'm going to cd into my desktop, and I'm going to make a directory called YouTube MERN Pagination, just like this. Then I'm going to cd into YouTube MERN Pagination. You can just press tab and it will auto complete. And then in here is where I want to create both my backend and my front end. So how I'm going to do it for this video, I'm going to make a directory called client, and this would be my front end. So if I were to ls this, we can see we have a client in here. The next thing I'm going to do is cd into the client, and then, okay, let's first not do that. I'm going to say npm init and then -y. So inside of this YouTube MERN Pagination, it would create a package.json file. So if I were to ls again, we can see the client folder and then a package.json. So for us to do this, we're going to need Express for our backend and Mongoose to talk to our MongoDB database. So let's quickly install those two dependencies. So I'm going to say npm I express and mongoose. If I press enter, these two packages will be downloaded, and once that is complete, we can create our server.js, or we can actually go into Visual Studio Code after this and start. So once this is complete, okay, there we go. So now all I'm going to do is I'm going to say code and then dot, so open Visual Studio Code in this directory, and it's opening on this side. So here we have our application folder structure. So I'm actually going to close this because I'm going to work in these two terminals over here. I'm going to create 2 of them. This one I'm going to cd into the client. So we're always in the client here, and here we're in the backend. So the next thing I want to do, we have Express installed, so I want to create a server.js file. So I'm going to say touch in the backend side, server.js. Okay, we see that file popping up here. And the important thing to do now in our package.json, we want to change this main to server.js instead of index.js. And then we want to create 2 scripts here. The first script is going to be start. And this script is going to use nodemon, which I don't have installed yet. So let's quickly do that. Let's quickly finish this and then we do that. So you can say nodemon server.js. So I'm actually going to go with only one script here because the next scripts I'll do in the next video when we deploy this application to Heroku. So I'm going to save this and quickly install NodeMon. So this is going to be a dev dependency. So I'm going to say npm I dash capital D and then NodeMon. This just helps refreshing the server automatically when we change things in our JS files. Okay, so there we have that. Okay, so let's quickly go, we're in the client here. Let's start by creating our React app. So we can say npx create dash react dash app and then just dot, or you can give it a different file name. I'm just going to leave it inside of client. So while that is running, we can go to server.js and set up our basic express server. So this is going to be really basic. So we can say const express equals require express. And then we're going to initialize this express in a variable called app. So we can say express app. If these things seems like odd to you or this doesn't make sense, I would really recommend go watching a few more beginner express videos, and this would just make it easier because I'm gonna go through this like you guys know the basics at least. So here I'm just gonna listen app.listen on some port variable which I'm gonna create now, and then a callback function is just going to console.log server running on port, and then I'm going to add the port here. So these has to be backticks. I'm not sure why it's not backticks. Okay, like that. So let's create that port variable. So we can say const port equals process.env.port. So this would look in our process.env variables, environment variables, for a variable called port, but we don't have any process.env set up yet. So the next package we're going to need is .env. So we can say npm i.env. This is just a normal dependency package. And then inside of our root directory, we can create a config.env file. And inside of this file is where we're going to specify this port. So here we can say port, capital letters, equal, and then I'm going to run on 5000 because my backend is going to be running on 3000. Oh, my front end is going to be running on 3000. So here I'm going to save this. And now we should have access to this here once we require the .env package. So we can say require.env. And then on this require, we're going to call a function config, and to this config we pass an object that receives a path of wherever our config file is. So basically it's just going to be / and then the config.env. So now we should have access to that variable, and we can test this out by actually running our server. Okay, we can see our front end is done. That's great. So let's go into our backend and we can say npm start, which is going to use NodeMon, and let's try that out. And we can see server running on port 5000. So nowhere else did I specify with the port 5000 except for in here, so we know this is working. Okay, great. So the next thing I want to do is actually build out the rest of our folder structure and then just clear the git file in our front end and put it inside of our root directory. So I'm going to do that quickly. Okay, I'm going to clear this out, and in here we're going to be building our folder. So I'm going to say make dir. I'm going to have a routes folder. I'm going to have a controllers folder. I'm going to have a models folder and utils folder. I think this is everything. Okay, oh, we're going to have a config folder as well. So I can just say make dir and create a config folder. Okay, so now we have our folder structure. And in here, we're going to have our routes, we're going to have our models and controllers. And then inside of config, we're going to have our database connection. Inside of utils, we're going to have some scripts to import data for us because I'm not going to enter all of that data manually. I'm going to give you guys a JSON file, and then we're just going to import that. So what do we need to do next? Okay, we need to go into our front end and remove the .git file. So I'm going to say rm for remove .rf.git. Okay, so if we want to check if that's gone, we can say ls a, and here we can see there is no more .git. So here's the .git ignore, but we're going to move that .git ignore into our root as well. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is inside of our root directory, I'm going to say touch.git ignore, and it will create this nice looking file over here. And in here, we're basically going to go into our front end, take that git ignore, copy everything in here, and then go back to the backend one, and then just paste everything down here. We're going to add two things. The first thing we're going to add is the .config, config.env that we have in our backend root directory over here. And then up here, the dependencies, we're just going to copy these node modules down and remove the slash from the beginning and put it at the end. If you were to save this now, you're going to see that the client's node modules are going to be grayed out. The backend's node modules are going to be grayed out, as well as the .config file. So let's try this. Save. Okay, we haven't actually created a Git repository in the root, so we can say git init. And once I do this now, it should gray out everything else. Okay, let's see. It grayed out this one. It did not gray out the env here, so we have to check that. It did gray out the node modules up there. So let's see, why did it not .config, just config, and save. Okay, so now the imported things are grayed out, so this will not be pushed to GitHub. Okay, great stuff. So that is all done. Okay. So here we have the basic setup of our project. The next thing I want to do is actually get the import of the data set up. So we're going to do the database, and then we will continue. So let's continue to that part next. Okay, so let's set up our database. So I have MongoDB running in the background. So you can go and set up a MongoDB Atlas cluster for this if you'd like. I have other videos where I show you how to do that. But for this one, I'm just going to use the local setup for MongoDB. Okay, so basically we're going to go into, I'm just going to close all of this up here. We're going to go into the config folder and create a file called db.js. And in here is where we're going to be using Mongoose. So I'm going to say const mongoose require mongoose package that we installed at the start. Okay, and now I want to create a function that connects to our database. So we can say const connect db is equal to some asynchronous function, and this asynchronous function is going to have a try catch block, and inside of the try we're going to connect. But first things first, we're going to need a connection string. So in our config.env, here I'm going to create a mongo underscore URI, and I'm going to set this equal to the string that is needed for the connection. So for the local setup, it's mongodb, and then colon / localhost 27017, and then / and then we can specify the database name. So the database I'm going to use for this is YouTube MERN Pagination. Okay, so this is the connection string. If you're using MongoDB Atlas, this would be the connection string they provide you, and then you just have to add your password and so forth. Okay, so I'm going to save this and close this up. And in here now I can say await, because we're going to talk to Mongoose and it's going to return a promise. So you can say mongoose.connect. And this connection takes URI string and then some options. So here we can once again say process.env.mongo_URI. And then we can pass an object with a few properties. So the first one is new URL parser, and we're going to set this to true. Basically everything here is going to be set to true. use find and modify, set that to true. Unified topology, set that to true. And then use create index and set that to true. Okay. The next thing we need to do, once this connection is successful, we want to console.log MongoDB connection success. And then I'm just going to add some emoji here, like a thumbs up. And then if something were to fail, we want to console.log MongoDB connection failed. And then some emoji. I like using this, either this one or this one. I'm just going to use this one for now. Okay. And then we want to exit the process. So we can say process.exit 1 with a status code of 1. So this basically just stops our node thread. Okay. And now we just have to export this function. So we can say module.exports equal to connectdb. Save this. Then we need to import this inside of our server.js. So right below and this is important that it's below the require of the .env. So we can say here, let's actually do it below here. So we can say connect db is equal to require, and then into the config folder and the db file. And then now we have the function connectdb in here, so we can just call it right below. And it is important, once again, that this connectdb should be below the require of the .env, because our function here needs access to the process.env. So if I were to save this now and run my backend, npm start, we should see MongoDB connection success and then our little shop. Okay, so this is successful. The next thing we need to do is actually go into our utils and create our import script. So you can say import data.js, and in here we're going to want to do the following things. First off, we want to require the .env again, because this is going to run separately from our server.js. So here we want to get our .env, and the config is just going to take a path again of /, and then config. Here you can just add /config.env, it would pick it up from here. And we're going to test that and make sure that it does as well. So the next thing we want to bring in is the file module. So we can say require fs. And the next thing we're going to need to do is actually bring in a model that we create to import our data. So we'll do that in just a second, but I'm just going to import that as well. So posts. We're going to work with posts and require, and then this is going to go into the model folder. So // outside here into the models, and inside of the models there's going to be a posts model. Okay, then we're going to need our connection to the database. So we can say const connectdb equals require into the util, into the config folder, and then the db file. Then we can straight up connect to our database. And then here is where we're going to be doing the manipulation of the data and the importing of the data. So the file I'm going to use is this package.json. I just collected a few data from MongoDB. Let's see if I can paste that in here. It's 500 records of posts. If you'd worked with MongoDB Atlas before, you can import sample data, and then I just imported sample data and I manipulated the body that it's not like ridiculously long, and then just added these few fields. Okay, so you are able to get this package.json from the GitHub repo. Just copy this and continue from there. Okay, so now we have this package.json here, so we can do the following. We're going to say const posts are equal to json.parse, and then what are we going to parse? We're going to say fs.readFile sync. I'm not going to explain these things, these are basic node concepts. And then in here I'm going to pass in backticks and pass in __dir to get the directory name, __dir name, and then posts.json, so the name of this file over here. And then the UTF-8, so we know it's in that format. So that is all. So this basically will populate our post variable over here with the json.parsed data from our text file. Okay, so now we want to import it. So we're going to say const import data is equal to an asynchronous function. And this asynchronous function is going to do the following. We're going to have a try catch once again. And in here, we're going to await post.create. So this is a mongoose function on the model, which we haven't created yet, but we'll do that right after this. And on this function, we want to create our, or add our data. So all we need to do is take this variable that has all our data and pass that in here. Then we can say console.log. We can say data successfully loaded, let's say, or imported. And then we can place another emoji in here, just like that. Okay, and then once that is done, we can say process.exit, because this does not have to run. We just want to exit it afterwards. If something were to fail, we want to log the error. So backticks once again. I'm going to say error, and then add my dangerous emoji. And then I'm going to add the error we catch, just like this. And then we can exit with process.exit of 1. Okay, and then the next function is actually to delete the things in the database. So we can say const delete data. So it's two different types of functions. It's asynchronous function, and this function is gonna receive try catch. And this is going to be a little bit easier. We're just gonna say await. On the post model, we want to delete many, and then just add these empty curly braces. Once that is done, we want to console.log, and here we want to say data successfully deleted, and then process.exit. We don't have to pass a status code of 1 because 1 means there was an error. And then we can copy this part as well if something had to go wrong. And then the next part is where we're going to check which one of these functions do we actually want to run. So inside of our terminal, we're going to basically type the following. I'm going to say node into the utils folder and import data.js. We're going to want to run that. But if we're currently going to run it, it's not going to run any of these functions because nowhere in this file are we like calling these functions. So we want to determine which one of these functions do the person want to run. So we're going to say -- import or -- delete. So in order to determine this flag that we pass in here, we need the following piece of code. So here we're going to have an if statement. And this if statement is going to receive the following: process.env or process.argv down here. And we're going to check the second part of this array. So the first part would be the name. It's going to be node and then the name and then whatever we have here. If that is equal to -- import, we want to run the import function. So we can say import data. And then else if the process.argv, the second part, is equal to -- delete flag, we want to call the delete data function. Okay, so that is awesome. We can save this now. We won't be able to test it out because we still don't have this post model. So let's quickly create that. That's pretty simple. So inside of our models folder, we're going to create post.js. And in here, we're going to say const mongoose equals require mongoose. And we're going to create our schema. So we're going to say post schema is equal to new mongoose.schema. And this mongoose.schema function takes in an object. And here we define how our schema is going to look like. So it's pretty simple schema. We're just going to have a title, whoops, like this, with type of string, and this is going to be required. We're going to set that equals to true, and please provide a title as the error message if that is not the case. The next field is the author name. So this is going to be of type string and required as well. So we set true, and please provide an author. And then the next thing is the actual body of the post, and here we're going to set it as type of string, and then required as true as well. And then please provide a body. Okay, so that is our entire schema. The next thing we need to do is create a variable called post and set that equal to mongoose.model. So this is the model post that we're using up here. So this is going to be that model. Okay, and to this model we are passing some string post, not some string, just call it post, and then we pass it the post schema, so the model knows what to validate on. Okay, and then we need to export this model, so we can say module.exports equals to post. If we save this now, we're going to see this is going to turn green. So we save this and go back, and okay, it actually did not turn green, but now we can actually check that it works. And we can add create. Okay, so let's make sure we imported this correctly. We actually called this post.js, not posts. So let's remove the S there, and here we can see it turned green. So it would just give you like some highlighting. I'm not sure if your extensions or theme is going to do this, but mine does, so we know this is all good. Just make sure to change this from posts to post. So okay, now we can actually test this out by importing our data. So here's our data, and we want to import it into our database. So I'm going to run that script. Okay, so let's just say node utils / import data.js and pass the import flag. If we run this, we can see data successfully, I totally misspelled successfully over here, successfully imported, and then it exit the process. So now if you wanted to check the data, we can go into our shell and say show dbs, or I know it's called use youtube.mern.pagination, I believe. Let's go check. What did I call it? db. Okay, it's in our config. YouTube MERN Pagination. Okay, so here I can say show collections, and it actually didn't import anything, so this is a problem. So let's quickly figure this out. Okay, so on the post here, it's going to create, oh, we never actually passed the data. Oh, I removed that to show you something, and then yeah, okay, so here we want to add the data. Sorry about that. And let's run that again. It's going to take a little bit longer. Yeah, okay, so the connection was successful and the data was imported. So let's go back now and say show collections, and we can see the posts. So we can say db.posts.find and then just pretty print them. And here we can see the first 20 posts because the cursor only returns 20. Okay, so this is great. Our data is imported and we've set up our database. Now we can continue building our routes. I'm just going to close all of this up because we're basically done with that. Now inside of our server.js, we want to create our routes connection. So let's quickly do that. We're going to say app.use, and this is the endpoint we're going to hit to get. There's only going to be one endpoint for this video. So we're going to say API. I like starting my endpoints with API and then the version of the API and then posts, whatever resource you are connecting to. And in here, we want to add the reference to the routes folder or the routes file that we don't have yet. So let's create that. Post routes.js. And in here, we're going to say const express equals require express. So this has nothing to do with the pagination yet. This is just setting up everything from the beginning. So I like doing things like this. It just gives you muscle memory. If you guys don't like this, please just let me know in the comments. Then I'll like set up a boilerplate, and then you can download the boilerplate and follow from there. Okay, so here we set up our router. Now we just need to module.exports that router. And in here we're only going to have one route. So we can say router.route. And then the route is going to be slash. And this slash route is going to get some controller function. So this controller function is going to be get all posts. Okay. And this get all posts controller is going to have the pagination logic. So let's quickly just import. I'm going to save this. It's going to not find this, but we're not running, so it's fine. And then inside of the server here, we can bring that routes folder or file in. So we can say const post routes equals require, and then go navigate into the routes folder and then that file. And then we just add this variable to our app.use middleware here. So this piece of middleware would just route us from here into here. Okay, hope that makes sense. Okay, so talking about middleware, we need one piece of important middleware to receive data. So we can say app.use, and in here we're going to use express.json. So this will just allow us to have access on our request body to the JSON data being sent. So we can save this. Oops, not remove that, save that. Okay, so let's create this controller now. So inside of our controllers folder, I'm just going to say posts, just post controllers.js, and we're going to have one function to export. So we're going to exports.get all posts. That's what I call it here, get all posts. And this function is going to be an asynchronous function that has access to the request and the response. And in here, we're going to try catch again. And we're going to need access to our post model. So we can bring that in. Const post equals require, and then navigate into the models folder and grab that post file. And in here is where the logic is going to lie. So for first, I'm just going to res.send post controller and then save. And then we're going to test everything out thus far. So we first have to bring in this controller into this file. So below here, we can say const post controllers is equal to require, and then navigate into the controllers folder and then grab that post controllers. And you can destructure this function from here by doing it like this. And then just saying get all posts like that. Or what I like to do, if you start having like a lot of controllers in here, I just like to add it like this. And then you can just do the following. You can say posts controller dot, and then we have access to all of the functions in there. Okay, so get all posts. So now we can save this and we are done here. And we're going to work on this logic in just a second, but we are done here for now. And I believe we are done. Okay, so let's close that up and let's test this out. So I'm going to go to Postman. If you don't know what Postman is, then you probably shouldn't take this video. Postman is just a HTTP client for making requests to our backend. So this is actually the correct route, so just gonna remove that like this. Okay, so let's start our server first. So we can say npm start. And now if I were to go and call this route, it should return post controller. And we can send, and we can see post controller. So everything is set up and working perfectly fine. The next thing we need to do is create the logic of the pagination in here. So let's do that next. Okay, so in here, I'm going to remove this now. And I'm going to add my try catch back here. And this is going to be like the logic for the backend for pagination. So there are many different ways to do this. This is just the way I choose to do it because it makes more sense for me, and handling it on the front end with this data is much easier. So let's start. The first thing I'm going to do is actually create a query variable. So I'm going to say let query equals to post.find. And the reason I'm doing it like this and not saying await here, because I don't want it to execute. I just want the promise. This returns a promise, so the promise is left in here. So I can add things onto this query, and then at the end await the final query and get the data. So now I want to create the important 4 variables. The first variable is going to be page. The next variable is going to be page size, then skip, and const total. So these are the 4 important variables to create pagination. The page is going to be calculated as follow. Inside of our URL, we're going to have the following type of query string. So in here, we want to go to API version 1 posts, and then we want this query string of page and say page 1. So we want page 1, and if we send, we only want to receive things of page 1. So this is what we're going to implement in the front end. So it sends to the API route this type of query string. So we can make this 2, 3, 4, and so forth, and it would load the specific data. Okay, so how do we get access to that query string? Well, we do the following. We say parse int, because everything in the query string comes as a string. Obviously, it's in the name. So we can say request.query. Express makes it really easy. We just say request.query and then whatever we named it. So we named it page. So if there's nothing inside of the request.query.page, we just want to default that to 1. The page size is going to be known as limit. So we can also specify the limit up here. So we have page and then ampersand. And then we can say limit, and say limit it to 100 posts or 20 posts or 50 posts. So this is going to be an optional parameter to pass, but we're just going to add that as well. So here we can add parse int once again, and request.query.limit. So limit the amount of resources being searched. And we're going to set this default to 50. Because I don't really pass the limit in unless it's for different routes or different resources, but I like to set it in this example to 50. And then here is skip. Skip is important, and this would make sense once we implement it. So basically how skip works is this determines after I'm at a certain page, I want only the next data. So this is like using slice in JavaScript to slice a certain part of the array and then use that. So here we're going to say, take the page number and minus it with 1. And then basically what we do is we times it with the page size. So if this makes sense, basically if we want page 1, we're going to take page 1 minus 1, which is 0, and times 0 with the page size, which is 50, and then you get 0. So we want to skip no documents. So I'll explain that again once we get to the next part. So the total is basically going to be await, and then we're going to use the post model and count documents on it like this. This is a mongoose function. So this will return the amount of documents there are. Okay, so now we can calculate the next variable called pages. So how many pages is our pagination going to have? And here we want to say math.seal, and we want to take the total amount of documents and divide that by the page size. So I hope this makes sense. We have 50 on a page and we have 500 in total. So 50 divided by, or 500 divided by 50 is giving us a total pages of 10, if that makes sense. Okay, so over here is where we want to actually run our query. So we can say query.skip. And this skip part is going to take in some number of documents to skip. And if you remember, we calculated the skip up here, so we can just add skip into it like this. And then the dot limit is going to take the page size. So these are two mongoose methods you can run on a query. So the skip will skip the number of documents you specify and then limit it based on the limit you give it. And then we're going to say const result is equal to await, and then we await the query. Then we want to respond with a status code of 200 and then some JSON. So here we're going to use the format of status and set status equal to success and count. So the amount of documents, we're going to say result.length, and then we want to add the pages variable as well as the page variable. I just switched those two up while I was speaking. And then some data, we want to add the result array we got from up here. Okay, and if there is an error, we just want to console.log that error and respond with the status code of 500. This is not the best way to handle errors, but I will make a specific video on handling errors in Node.js. And then we're going to have a message of server error and save this. Okay, so we're done with our controller route here. I'm just going to minimize this like that. Now I just want to go over this once again. Sorry if I'm repeating myself. You can skip to the next part. I'm just going to explain this pagination here again. So basically we start off by getting the page number. So imagine we're on page 1. Then we have the limit or the size that we want, the amount of documents on a page. So on page 1 we want 50 documents. On page 2 we want 50 documents. Then we want to calculate how many documents we need to skip in order to get the specific pages documents. So if we go down here where we skip, we query.skip, and let's say we're on page 2. We're on page 2 now. So we have page 2 minus 1. It gives us 1 times the page size, which is 50. So skip value is equal to 50. Then we query.skip the first 50 and we limit the next 50. So it's going to keep on doing that to get the right data for the specific page. I really hope that makes sense. Okay, so now we're done with this route, so we can actually test this out in Postman. So let's go to Postman. Oh my goodness, my words. Okay, so we remember now we are adding 50 on a page. So we already have our param variable here, so we can actually remove it here, and then I'll show you. If we add here page, it automatically adds the param up here, and we want to go to page 1. So if we send this now, we get a status of success, a count of 50, which is correct. This is page 1, which is correct. And there is a total of 10 pages, which we calculated earlier, because 500 divided by 50 gives you 10. And then you get the first 50 documents. Now I want to go to page 2, so I'm going to change this to page 2 and send. I get back 50 count again, and then page 10. Okay, so the next thing, I'm not going to do any checking here that you go over. I'm just going to do that in the front end, so you won't be able to make a request to a page that isn't there. So if I make a request to page 11, which there is not because there's only 10 pages, and I send this, we're going to get back this, which actually is not correct. You want to send some like response saying page not found, a 404 error. So basically you're just going to have to check that the current page is not bigger than the pages. So we can actually do that by going down here, and all we want to do is say if page is greater than pages, we want to res.status of 404 and then return a JSON message. So we're going to have a status of failed and a message of no page found, and save this. Let's try it out. If we send this now, we should get the status of failed and no page found. So you don't really need to do this here now, but yeah. Okay, we actually have to return this. because we don't want it to continue with the rest. That is why our node MERN server crashed. So let's restart that and save and try that again. Send. Now everything should still be working. Okay, great stuff. So this is done for our backend. Next, let's start with our front-end implementation, and that is the more tricky part. So let's go. Okay, so first things first, let's quickly just clear out. Let's start our server. So we can say on the client side, we can say npm start. This should open our browser on localhost 3000. Okay, so we're just going to see the basic React boilerplate, and we're going to clean up the files that we don't need. Okay, so let's do that quickly. Inside of our client source, we're going to go into app.css and just remove everything from here. Save. So this would make it really ugly. Close that up. Go into app.js, and we want to firstly change this to a functional component or arrow function, not a functional component. It was already one. Okay, and then just remove this logo import from up here, and then remove everything inside of the div and just add a h1 saying app. Save this. If we go back, we can see it here. There's still some default stylings, and this is from the index.css. So let's first remove this app.test over here. We don't need that. So let's take the index.css and clear everything out here. We're going to add a few default stylings. The first is margin, set that to 0, and padding, set that to 0. And then border box, not border box, box sizing of border box. Okay, and then on the body we want to add some bg color, and we're gonna set that equal to EF, which is just like this off-white grayish. It's not really gray, it's more off-white. And then we want to set the font family equal to Arial, and then the line height of 1.7. I think that is everything, so we can save this. And we can go into the index.js, and we can remove everything from here. Remove this from here. Just to clean this up, keep it simple. And then we're going to change this in just a second. We can remove this logo.svg, we can remove this, and we can remove this. So now we are left with only the 4 most important files here. And let's see, we can save this and go back to our application, and everything is still working. So it has like this off-white background. Okay, so let's start by building this application. First thing we need to do is going to the app.js, and in here is where the magic is going to happen. So in app.js, I'm gonna start building my JSX first. So this JSX is going to look as follow. We're going to have, I'm just gonna make it as comments. We're going to have some pagination component here. And then in the middle, we're going to have the posts being rendered. So posts listing like this. And then right at the bottom, we're going to have a pagination component once again. So there's going to be pagination at the top and at the bottom. So here you can see the reuse of a component as well. Okay, the next thing we need to do is actually go and create these pagination objects and list the posts. So in order to get the posts, we're going to have to make a request to our backend. So let's first bring in use effect and use state. So we can say import use state and use effect, and this is going to come from React. We have the app.css, and then yeah. Okay, so inside of our app function right at the top, we're going to create our posts. So we can say posts is equal to set posts, and this is going to be use state, and this should be default just an empty array. Then we're going to have const of loading, and set loading, and use state once again, and default, this is going to be equals to false. Next one we're going to need, I'm just copying that down, is an error. So for if there is something wrong with our call to the backend, and set error, And that is it for now. We're gonna have the rest just in a second. So let's create a use effect to make our side effect to the backend, or our call to the backend. Okay, so what we're going to do in here, we're going to need a function that's called fetch the posts, or fetch data, whatever. I'm just going to call it fetch posts. And this function is going to be an asynchronous function. And inside of this function, we're going to fetch. So firstly, I'm going to say try catch, because we're making an async request. And right at the start, I want to set loading to true. So this means we are making the request now, and we set the loading to true. Okay, and then we want to say const res equals await, because here we are going to receive a promise from the fetch API. We're just going to use fetch API for now. This is the easiest. And in here, all I want to do is say /API /version1 /posts, and then the query string. So in here, I'm going to pass question mark, and then I'm going to add a variable. So it's important these should be backticks, obviously. And then in here, I want to add the page we want to go to. So if you remember, well, we actually have to add page in front here, page, and set that equal to the page number we want to go to. So if you remember in Postman, why is it not going to Postman? We had this type of format. We can say the API route, which we are calling, posts, and then question mark page equals to the page number. So we're going to need some piece of state that holds our page we are currently on. So I'm going to create another piece of state, and I'm going to call this state page. And in here, I'm going to say set page, and by default, it should always load page 1. I hope this makes sense. Okay, and then we can do the following. So once we get the data from our fetch API, we can say const and then await the response.json. So this is standard if you work with fetch API. And then here we just want to destructure the data we get from our backend, and then the pages. And we want to set this pages equal to total pages. Because if you remember what our backend sends to us, let's go into the controller just to refresh your memory. It sends us pages and data. So that is what we are destructuring from here. We're getting the data and we're getting pages, but we're calling this pages total pages. Okay. So the next thing we need to do is actually set these things in state. So I'm going to say set pages, which we don't have yet. So let's actually create that. I'm going to drop this down, call this pages, and set pages. And I'm going to set pages equal to total pages. Then I'm going to set post, which we do have up here. I'm going to set posts equal to the data we received. And then I'm going to set loading to false, because the data is already fetched and the loading is false now. If there were to be an error, I want to firstly console.log that error so that I can see it. We will remove this once we deploy. And then here we set loading to false again, because loading has stopped. And we set an error to some error occurred. Okay, just like that. Now we need to add things to this dependency array. And the thing we need to add to this dependency array is going to be the pages, this page, because this entire use effect depends on what page we are, so that it re-renders and calls again. So we're going to add here page, and then we need to call this function inside of our use effect. So right below it, we can say fetch posts and just call the function like this and save. So now if I go back to my browser and I refresh and I check inspect the tools and I view my network and I just refresh again, I can see the request is being made. So post query params page 1, a GET request, but we can see it has a status code of 304. And if I view this, the preview data doesn't show up here. And the reason for this is because we have to create a proxy in our package.json. So here we can create proxy. So this would kind of almost redirect our requests to our backend. So proxy localhost, HTTP localhost 5000 and save. And then it's important to restart your React server. And the reason we're doing the proxy is because here we're not specifying, over here we are not specifying the port we are going to. We're not saying HTTP localhost 5000. So it's trying to make a request to 3000 and then it's just like nothing is happening. Okay, so if we go back now and we view our network tab and we refresh, we can see we get a 200 OK. So this is what we set on the backend, and here we receive our data. We have our 50 data pieces and our count. And this is for page 1. Okay, so this is working now. So the next thing we need to do is figure out whenever I go to a next page. So we set the page by default equal to 1. And this does not exactly work that well because whenever I go to page 5 and I want to refresh the page, this piece of state is lost. And then it's just going to keep on jumping back to page 1, and we don't want that. So in order to fix this, we're going to use some routing. And I'm going to install now npm I react-router-dom. And this is going to install, and we're going to use that in order to extract a few things from our URL params. So I'll show you what I mean by this. Okay, so this is done installing, so we can run npm start again. Just going to close this browser up. It's going to open. Okay, so back in here, I'm going to do my routing inside of my index.js, as this is a fairly small project. Usually you do it in your app.js, but I'm just going to do everything here. So here I'm going to import some things from React Router DOM. Okay, and here I want to import the browser router as router. I want to import the switch and the route. So here I'm going to remove this strict mode. I'm just going to add the router there, and I'm going to remove this app. I'm going to place a switch in here, and then I'm going to have 2 routes to our app component. So I'm going to say route like this. I'm going to have 2 of them. The first one is going to exact path, and this one is going to slash page slash and then some page number. And this will render component app. The next one is going to go to exact path equals just slash. And this is also going to render the app component. So why am I doing this? Because when I redirect, when I choose a page, so let's say I start with some page. So let's quickly, let me show you. I'm going to save this. And then inside of my app, I'm going to destructure something from the props. Because we use routing, we have access to the match prop now. So I'm going to console.log this. I'm going to say console.log match.params. What did I call it? Page number. Okay. I'm going to save this. And if I were to go here now and inspect my DevTools, I'm going to clear this up and refresh. We can see undefined being logged. And the reason for that is because we don't have any params yet. So if I go to slash page and then say page 1 and I search, now we can see we have a match param of 1. And the reason it's logging these many times is because these states keep on changing when I refresh. So I'm actually going to do something here to make this even better. Okay, so here I want to do the following. I want to say console const page number is equal to request dot, or not request, match dot params dot page number. And if this is not found, I want to set page equals to 1. So we saw previously that if we land on this, just the normal index page, we don't get any params. If we actually do go to a page, then we have access to this route that has access to the number. So if I were to show you this and save, okay, so let's actually set the page number equals to that then. Over here, page number, and save this. So now, every time I were to go to this page over here and refresh, I will still have access in my state to the page I'm currently on. So if I go to page 2 and refresh, I'm still on page 2. So if I were to refresh now, I'm still on page 2. Where if we didn't have this implementation, so I would remove this now and remove page number and set it back to 1. Every time I get to say here, I want to refresh, then we lose our state. It says we're on page 2, but the state went back to page 1. So this is how you would implement that type of logic. So I'm not really going to have like, you know, a full-fledged application now where I can switch between different views. I'm only using the app view, but this is how you would implement that piece of logic. So you would add this piece of code that would refresh your application and then set whatever is in the URL params. I really do hope this makes sense. So I'm just going to use this as page number here because it just it works either way. And then I'm just going to go back to just the slash route and we're on page 1. So now I'm going to show you how to implement this part of the application. So what we're going to need to do now is create a few things. So let's start by just adding a small a there, and we're going to need the following things. We're going to need a pagination component, 2 of them actually. We don't have these yet, but we'll create them in just a second. Right over here. And then we need some card listing. So here I'm just going to have a div. I'm going to give this a class name of, let's see, app __ posts. And then in here, we're going to render everything that's in our posts array. So if I go back here, we can still see we have all of our posts. Okay. I don't hope this part confused you guys. I just had to add this in here for in case someone had the problem of page refreshes and then losing state. So here's just a solution for that. The rest of the things stay basically exactly the same. And in here, we want to loop through our posts and map. For each post, we want to create a card. So we're going to pass in here a card component. And then this card component is going to have a key, which is going to be the post._id, and then the post data of that specific post. It's looping through. So we need to create these 2 components, a card and a pagination. So let's quickly do that. If I save, it's going to break everything now, but that's okay. In our source, let's go to components, or create a components folder, and in here we can create a card.js, and we can say rafce just to create our functional component. Instead of importing React here, we can import the CSS, so you can say card.css, which we are going to create now. So let's create that, card.css, and here we can say class name of card, and this, or we can actually build this thing completely. We don't have to check that. It's really simple. We're just going to import the post that we got as prop over here. And then we can do the following. We have 3 p tags. The first p tag will contain the post.title, I believe it's called. The next one is post.author. And in here I can have post.body. Just going to give each one of these a different class. I'm going to copy this one up here, paste it in, and give this __ title, __ author, and __ body. I'm going to save this now, and if we go back, we still don't have the pagination, so let's quickly create that. Pagination.js. Here I'm just going to say rafce. This is pagination component, and save. We don't need React. I'm just going to import the CSS. which we don't have yet, but we'll do it. CSS. And here in the components, we can say pagination.css. Okay, so I'm just going to close all of these up now. We don't need this. Okay, so we don't need the React part here. And save. So now if we save our app component, we just need to import these things. So I'm going to import them up here. Components, import card from components/card, and then I want to pagination and save. If we go back and check our application now, we can see everything is listing. The cards are not styled properly, but these are the 50 things being loaded. So let's do a few styles in our app quickly. I want to style this app and this apps.post. So in our app.css, I want to go here and say app and give this a max width of 1400 pixels, a margin at the top and bottom of 5 rem, and auto on the sides. This is just so that it gets centered in the middle. And then we want to say app underscore post. Is it posts or post? Posts. And here all I want to do is say display flex and flex wrap, set it to wrap, and then align items to the center. And if I were to save this now and go back here and close this, we can see it has like this centered container type of vibe. Okay, the next thing I want to do is style these cards. I want to make them look nice, so this is also going to be really quick actually. I'm going to give the card a style of width 300 pixels, a text aligned center, a box shadow of 0 pixels, 3 pixels, 6 pixels, and RGBA of 0, 0, 0, and then 0.5 transparency. I'm going to give it a background BG color of white, and then some padding of 1 rem. I'm going to give it a margin left of 1 rem, and then a margin bottom of 1 rem as well. So if I were to save this and go back, we can see it started to take some form. Now I just want to style the title and the body and the author so we can just see them better. Okay, so the title, I want to give a title of font size 1 rem, should be fine. A font weight of 700, so it's bold. And then a margin bottom of 1 rem. Let's just do everything 1 rem. Then I want to give a card author. I want to make the font size smaller, so I'm going to give it a font size of 0.7 rem. Font weight is already 400, so I'm just going to give it a margin bottom of 1 rem. And I'm just going to copy this because the body is almost the same. Just going to change this to body, and I'm going to give it a font size of 0.9, and we don't need a margin bottom. So I'm just going to save this, and now if I go check out my cards, they look so much better. Okay, so this is how it looks in the ending application. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is start implementing the pagination component. This is where the main logic is going to lie for our pagination in the front end. So let's quickly just determine what props we're going to pass here. The first prop I'm going to pass in here is the actual page we are currently on. So where do I get that from? Well, from the page state over here. The next thing I want to do is add the pages, and where would you get that? From the pages state over here. So the next thing we need is that change page. So this is a function. We're going to change a page in the pagination component, and this change page, all it's going to need is this set page function from the use state. So we're just going to say set page and pass that in right there. So I'm going to copy this and pass it to the bottom one here as well and save. And now we need to go and start building our pagination component. So let's destructure what we need from here. What I'm going to need here is the following. I'm going to get the page, I'm going to get the pages, and I'm going to get the change page function. So let's quickly look at how this JSX will be structured. So first off, I'm going to check, before I return anything, I want to check, is pages greater than 1? And if that is the case, I want to do the following. I want to have a div that has a class name of pagination. And then in here, I want to return 2 buttons, which are the 2 buttons on the side, the one to go to previous and the one to go to next. So let's create the 2 buttons. This button has a class name of pagination __ previous. And let's copy that. This one has of next, pagination of next. So the symbols I'm going to add in here are just some HTML code symbols. So it's just type what I'm typing here. I don't know how to pronounce some of these characters. So just like that, that would give us the previous arrow. And if we do the one below for the next arrow, it's going to look like this. Okay, so now we have that. So if I actually save this and go back here, we can see these 2 arrows. So that is what I was talking about, the symbols. I'm going to reset that. Okay, and then in between here, we want some middle pagination, you know, where the numbers are the pages. So we can say middle pagination. So we don't have that yet. So for now, I'm just going to save it like this. We know we need to generate some JSX to be placed in the middle over there. But first, let's finish these buttons logic. Okay, so what does the previous button need to do? It should have an on click that is able to do the following. We should be able to say, call an anonymous function and say change page. And this is basically, if we think about it, this change page is just the set page state over here. So if you know how state work, you can just say page as an argument, and then the function returns page -1 because we want to go to the previous page. And now we can do this same on-click style for the button down here. Just going to add that in. And instead of minusing 1, we can +1 now. Okay, so that is the logic that should go into these buttons. The last piece in here is disabled. And I want to set this disabled equal to a boolean. So this boolean should either be true or false. When should it be true? Well, when the page we get here is equal to 1. Because then we know we're on the first page and you can't go further than the first page. And then this disabled for down here. When do we want this to be disabled? Can you think of this? So we're on the last page, so you can't go to a next page. When do we want this to happen? Well, when page is equal to pages. So pages is the total amount of pages. And whenever our page we are on is equal to this, we want it to be disabled. So if we were to save this now, this actually would change our pages. So here we can see we're on page 1, so it's disabled. And here we can start changing pages. So this is really nice actually. But we don't have the numbers and the nice looking things. So let's quickly do a few styles because this will just help us see the things better as we go. So the styles I'm going to add here is pagination. I'm going to set pagination to padding of left. And I'm just going to give it a 1 rem. So it just is aligned with our container. So I'm just going to push it this way so it's aligned. And then the next thing I want to do is give it a margin. Margin of 1 rem, top and bottom. and 0 left and right. And then I actually want to set a specific margin. So we can actually just give this a margin top of 1 rem. And then a margin bottom of 2 rem. And save. Now we can go back and check it out. Now we can see it's aligned here. And at the bottom, it's aligned here. So we have nice spacing. Okay. This is not really a CSS tutorial, so not everything is going to look very pretty, but just bear with me. And then pagination, the buttons. So we're going to have a lot of buttons. So I want to style each of these buttons the same way. So I'm going to say margin right of 0.5 rem. I want to give it a cursor of pointer. And then I want padding inside of 7 pixels and 15 pixels left and right. And then the last thing, here we are setting some of the buttons as disabled, and I want to give the disabled buttons a better style. So I'm just going to copy this selector over here and say the disabled tag over there. And now all I want to do is give it a different style. So I'm going to give it a background color of this matte black, #333, and then a color of white. Okay, and then a cursor of not allowed. So this would give us that red looking cursor. So if I go back here, we can see we are currently on the first page, so it's disabled, and it gives us this nice looking cursor. So you can't actually click. It's just nice feedback. And we can continue, and whenever we get to the page, it turns like that. Okay, so we're done with the CSS over here. Now we have to start thinking about how we can implement the logic for this part of the pagination. So this is where the dynamic and a little bit of a tricky part comes in. So try and follow with me. If things don't make sense, print them out, log them to the console for yourself, and this would just make everything more clearer. Okay, so let's go. I'm going to say let middle pagination as a variable. We're just going to create the variable. And here I'm going to do a few checks. I'm going to say if the amount of pages there are greater or equal to 5, then I want this piece of code to run. So I want middle pagination to look a certain way for this condition. So here I'm going to say middle pagination is equal, and here I'm going to add some logic to render JSX. I'm going to say the following. I'm going to create an array. So I'm going to say array. And this array is going to be of size 5. Or we actually don't want to give it a set size here. We want to give it the size of the amount of pages that there are. So we know, according to this if statement, that there is 5 or less pages. So we want this array to be of size 5 or less. And then I want to map through this array. And for each element we're not going to use, so I'm just going to put an underscore and then index. Just wrap these like that. And for each index, I want to render a button. So here the button is going to look like this. Why is Emmet not working? Button. Okay. And this button is going to look as follows. So we have the index. So arrays are 0-based index, and humans don't start at 0, so we start at 1. So there's always going to be index plus 1. So I hope this makes sense. Okay. We have to give it a key because we are rendering something in a map. So we give it index plus 1 as its key. Then we give it a class name. Yeah, we don't actually have to give it a class name. So here, all we have to do is give it an onClick. And let's think about, what does this onClick have to do? It's a function that's going to have to call the change page again. And how is this change page going to look like? Well, this change page needs a page number. And what is the page number? Yes, you are correct. The page number is index plus 1. Okay, I hope that makes sense. And then the disabled again. What is the disabled rule? Whenever the page number we are on is equal to what? The index plus 1, because that is the page in this array. Okay, I hope that makes sense. And then what is the text we want to display in the button? Index plus 1. So if we were to go and save this now, as it looks here, it's not going to show anything because we have more than 5 pages. So if I go back and change our post controller to give us something that's 5 pages, so that's 100, and save this, and go back to our front end and refresh. Okay, so something is not lacking here. Oh, we actually have to uncomment this. Okay, we can save that. Now we can see the 5 pages being logged over here. But we actually, when we have more than 5 pages, so I can show you this again, and I change this back to say 50, and I refresh here, we're not going to see those numbers in the middle because according to our condition here, the amount of pages is more than 5. Okay, so now we have to do checks for the rest. So here I'm going to say else. And for the else piece, there's going to be more types of checks needed to happen. Okay, so we can basically do the following. We can say const start value is equal to math.floor. And the math.floor is going to take in the current page we are on minus 1. And we're going to divide this by 5. And the reason we choose 5 here is because we just want to show 5 tabs to the client at a time. So 5 and then times 5 again. So this is a little mathematical thingy. So we have to figure out where do we want our array number to start counting from. So here we usually just take the array's index and plus 1. But now as we go and there's more pages, we want some starting value and then plus the index and the plus 1. Okay, so let's implement the logic I'm just trying to explain here. And now we're going to need the following. We're going to return a fragment. And this fragment is going to do the same as above. We're going to have some JavaScript where we create an array. We spread the array. And the size of this array is going to be 5 once again. And we're going to map through. So for each element, which we don't need, so just put underscore and then index, we want to render buttons again. And these buttons are going to contain the following logic. So you can say button. Why is Emmet not working? It's so annoying. And the button is going to have a key. And this key is going to be equal to start value plus the index plus 1. So go and log this out for yourself, then it would make sense. So this just tells us if we're on a certain page and we're above 5, then we get a value to start from. So if we're on page 6, let's think about it. We're on page 6, so 6 minus 5, 6 minus 1 is 5. 5 divided by 5 is 1. And 1 times 5 is 5. So the starting value here is going to be 5 when we're on page 6. So now the key of this button is going to be 5 plus the index, which is 0 plus 1. So it's going to be page 6 or button 6. I really do hope that makes sense. I feel like I explained that well. So disabled is going to be the exact same as above, but we have start value now in front of everything. Plus 1. And then the on click is going to do the following. We're going to say some function or anonymous function is going to call the change page function. And this change page function should go to start value plus index plus 1. And then whatever we want to display inside of the button is start value plus index plus 1. Okay, just like that. And then after this, so here we actually do it like this. This is when there is more than 5 buttons. And then after this, that's why we have a fragment. We want to render a button that has the ellipse in. So just the normal ellipse. And then another button which has the last most page. So here we can add pages. And the on click over here is going to call the on change page function and just pass in the last page in our list. So if we save this and go back now, we can see the following. Okay, so this is wrong. We'll figure that out now. But we can see the following. It's doing 1 through and then we can see there's the page 10 at the end here. So if we click on 10, now we're actually on page 10 and we're not able to go anywhere. So there's something wrong with our disable here. So let's quickly figure that out. Okay. So when we're disabling, okay, so we actually didn't give a condition. We just set that there. So whenever our page is equal to whatever that sum gives us. So if we go back now, we can see we're on page 1, we're on page 10, and this is doing some weird stuff here, but we're going to do that now in the last piece of this check. Okay, so the last piece inside of this else, we have to do 2 more checks. We're going to have a if the page, so if our page is greater than 5, so the current page we are on, if it's greater than 5, we want to run this part. Else, we want to do something else. Okay, not else. We actually check here if it's greater than 5. All right. Okay, let's try that again. Okay, so this part will be the default, and then down here is where we do the following checks. We're going to have an if statement here. So if our page, our current page we're on is greater than 5. So here it will log if we are not greater than 5. So we're still below 5 in our page number. And here we check if our page is greater than 5, and then inside of this if we're going to have another if statement. I know this is hard to understand, but just bear with me. And then here we're going to check if pages minus page is greater or equal to than 5, then we want something to happen here. Else, we want something else to happen. So this is the entire logic of this thing. Now we just have to implement the middle pagination and how it's going to look. So in here, the middle pagination is basically going to look the same as up here. So I'm just going to copy this. We're just going to add things in front of it. So here, we're going to add buttons that contains page 1 always, and then some ellipse. So now we are past page 5, so we're going to say 1 ellipse and then the rest of the things. So previously when we were here, we had ellipse and then the last page. But say we have 50 pages and we are at page 25. We don't want to show all 25 here, so we're just going to show page 1, ellipse, and then the rest of the other 5. I hope that makes sense. Okay, so this on click for this button should take us to page 1 again. So we're going to change page and go to page 1. And then we want a button here that has the starting value. So we can say on click this page, this button will take us to change page, which should call a function page. And in here we want start value, and then it should display as text the start value as well. We can display this in just a second. Okay, so we can actually try this out now and save and go back. And here we can see the following. If I go to page 5 and I go to 6, here we can see what I mean. So it didn't pick it up here at the end because the next logic isn't figured out yet, because now it's 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So let's actually make the amount of things that are returned less. So let's say that only returns 12 things and refresh here. Now there's 42 pages. So if I go to page 5, then page 6, here you can see what I mean. So it says 1 and then the ellipse 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 and then the ellipse and then 42. So the last piece is if we get close to the last page, it shouldn't do this weird thing it's doing over here. So let's do that last part. So that's the else part of this problem. So here in the else block. So we can copy this actually again. So let's copy that and paste it down here. And instead of having these at the end, there's not going to be any buttons at the end left. There's only going to be at the start. So this stays exactly the same. And then this logic here also stays exactly the same, except for one thing. Let me show you. If I save this and go back, we can see it's weirdly showing. Let's go to 42. It's weirdly showing these things over here, which it should not be showing. So in order to fix that, we should actually, I'm doing this wrong. We should set, I'm just going to cut this, and I'm going to set middle pagination equal to that logic and paste it back in there. Just going to remove that and save. So if we go back now, we can see it shows 43, 44, and 45, which there is not. 42 is the last page. You can see I can't skip, but if I click here, the entire thing is going to crash. So how do we solve this? If I get to page, oh, it made that was weird. Okay, let me refresh again. Okay, there was just some delay there. Okay, if I were to go to page 42 now, 42 is the last page. So we want to hide everything that is bigger than 42. So here on this button that we're looping through at the end, we want to place a conditional style. And this style is going to contain the following logic. We're going to say, if pages is less than the start value plus index plus 1. So this would give us, so this gives us the page value of the current button being rendered. So if that is greater than the amount of pages there are, then we just want to hide it. So we're just going to say display of none. Else we just load null. Okay, let's go back. And here we can see it works. So if we go to 40, it shows us the following. If we go to 35, so let's go to 42, it only shows us till 40, and then we have, okay, so here something is wrong. Let's figure that out. Okay, so how I would go about solving this issue. So if we check what is wrong, when we get to 40, it loads the rest, but then it's out of the 5. So this 5 is not enough. If we were to add it to something else, the remaining 2, then it would load everything. So how I would solve this, I would say let amount left equals to the pages minus page plus 5, not times, plus. And then instead of rendering it 5 times, we render it the amount that is left. So let's see what this does. Okay, so it's just going to throw everything else out instead of like saying, oh, we looped 5 times, but the rest we didn't have, we didn't add. So if I go to 41, it's going to show this again because then it's fine. But when I go to 40, now it's just going to show everything, which makes it actually better in my opinion, if you think about it, because these are the last pages. So yeah, this was a little bit of a hack at the end to get it working really dynamically. So now we can basically go through every single page. If we get here, we go to 5, we get to 6, it shows us 5, we can go to 6, goes to 10, go to 11, 15, 16, 20, 21, 25. And then there it just gives us everything. So if we go back here and we move one up, we get 40. As soon as I hit 40, or as soon as there's less than 5 left, then it's just going to throw everything out that's left. Just like that. So I think this works. Let me know what you guys think about this project. I really hope this helps you. The best thing always is to try and get rounded numbers. So if I were to go back here and return, instead of 12, I'm going to return something like 20 and save. Then we get 25 pages, which is easier for rounding. Okay, now it's just taking me to page 2. Just want to go to page 1. And let's see. Everything looks fine. Everything is still fine. If we get to 20 and we go to 21, then the rest is just going to show. Yeah. Perfect. So here it's just like a equal number to 5. So it just works. It looks better, but everything will work as we have it here. So it's really, really dynamic depending on your pages. So if I were to do something that only gives me 5 pages back and I refresh, I only get 5 pages. So that's really nice. I can go to page 5, page 1, page 3, and everything just as this. Okay, so that's really nice. If I were to have an insane amount of pages, so I'm only loading 4 per page and refresh, then I'm going to have 125 pages. And we never actually want 125 tabs to show, so this actually works really nice in this format. So yeah, I really do hope you enjoyed this video. One last thing we need to do is add the loading and then the error if there is any. So over here. So right down here, all we're going to say is if things are loading, so if loading is set to true, we want to have a h3 that Emmet is not giving me. Don't know why. And this h3 should do the following. It should display loading and set that like this. I think I'm missing something here now. Why is it? It should be in here. Else we want to check if there is an error, and if there is an error, once again just load an h3 and add the error message that we saved in there. Else, if none of these things are the case, then we want to render this over here. So we're just going to add a fragment and add that in there and save. So now if I go back and we load, it's really, really subtle and really fast. You can't even see it there. You can see it a little bit. So let's do something wrong with the API request and save. Some error occurred. Okay, so everything is working here. Let's just style these two things to make it a little bit more complete. So I can say class name is equal to loading text and give this a class name of error text. Error text. So let's go and style these two in app.css. We can say loading text and error text and give them a font size of 2 rem and just text align them to the center. And then for the error text, I just want to give it a color of red. And if we save this and go back, we can see the error has occurred. And let's see, yeah, we can see that loading appearing there for just a little second. But yeah, this is the application. I really do hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, please don't forget to like and subscribe. Leave a comment if you have any better solutions than this, or any articles that I can read and maybe make a better video than this. But this is the solution I came up with. It works perfectly fine. It's a little bit of mathy things to get your head around at the start, but once you have it, it all makes completely sense. So the next part of this video, which I'm going to do later, is going to be deploying this application to Heroku. So give this video a thumbs up if that is something you would like to see, and then I'll see you in the next one. Cheers, guys.